Hi everyone, welcome to Behind the Risk, the podcast where UE risk management experts share the experience and best practices. In this episode, we are exploring the world of credit risk management in the engineering service industries. Joining us today, Andrew Barbaro, the Director of Customer Finance Services at Emerson. Hi Andrew, how are you doing?
Very well, pleasure to be here.
Thanks a lot actually for joining us today for this second episode of the Behind the Risk podcast. I'm very pleased actually to have you because I'm sure we're going to actually have a very wonderful experience actually and great insight actually coming from you. But before actually we deep dive actually in some of these questions I would like to ask you, I'd like actually to present you to our audience that might not know everything about you yet. So Andrew is not just actually a seasoned professional. He is a visionary in the realm of credit and risk management. With boasting extensive experience, Andrew's expertise spans across ensuring the efficient management of credit risk control, debt collections, risk mitigations. His leadership role at Emerson in the Middle East and Africa region has seen him actually leading strategies that not only optimize operations but also maximize revenue, and all while maintaining sterling customer service standards. It's a lot, Andrew. I'd like to understand first, how do we end up to be an expert and a director in the customer finance and credit risk industry? Tell me about it.
I was initially I moved to Dubai in 2019, so I took on the role by invitation at that point. And prior to that, I was over in the UK working for a paper merchant. So, and I've had years of extensive experience in credit management and at a senior level as well, which has stood me in good stead. But it's quite a different environment in the Middle East.
Okay. So here you are in charge of the customer finance services actually at Emerson. Can you detail a bit more what it means in practice actually for your organization?
Sure. So we manage credit collections and we also manage risk as well. We've got a team of individuals that work for us in Dubai. So there are 3 of us in Dubai that work in management. And we also have 2 other teams in service centres, one team in Cluj, and they are in Romania. They service the French-speaking Africa, so they speak the French. And also a team in Manila in the Philippines who do the English-speaking collections. We also have collectors that are based in country as well. So we have one in Saudi Arabia, one in Egypt, and one in Nigeria as well. So, and it'll be 2 in Saudi Arabia by this weekend. So, yeah, we're based all around the region, and depending on where the need is.
Okay, so here Dubai is really your headquarters for your department, where you manage actually the different clients that you might have within this region.
Correct.
What kind of clients do we speak about? I mean, in terms of industries or profiles, what are they most of the time?
It tends to be in the Middle East. It tends to be predominantly oil and gas, and also water, and there are other mining businesses, particularly in Africa as well. But we service the companies that tend to supply the national companies that do the extraction, that do the mining as well. So we service the intermediaries, generally they're local business partners, or companies in between ourselves and the end user.
Okay, so here we are speaking specifically about customer finance, like in your role actually description. What does it mean actually in practice? Can you explain the process when a client that you just actually mentioned needs customer finance actually to get access to your services?
Sure. So we would be responsible for onboarding the customer, doing the checks, doing the due diligence, making sure all of the checks are done to ensure that we are satisfied with the risk that we're facing with that particular customer. And in the Middle East, particularly Middle East Africa, there's less information to work with. So we have to do a lot more research, and we also have to do an awful lot more work with the customer to make sure that we get the financials that we need to be able to understand their risk profile. And so that's the onboarding side of it. And then obviously through the sales, and through within the limit that we set and within the terms that we set, we would be responsible for collecting the money as well. So making the contacts with the customer, making sure the payments are received on time, and working with the customer to maintain that. And in between all of that, managing any disputes that arise within the course of business.
So you are basically facilitating business deals for your organization actually.
Correct.
Without you, it would be maybe too difficult actually for your organization to deal with all of these different customers with different types of profiles, or they might actually go into deals that are actually very difficult and very dangerous for organization, and then actually ended up into a critical financial situation. That's correct?
Correct, yeah. And also within our business that we have so many business units that sell to these customers. So it could be any strand of business within Emerson that sells to our customer, but we sit across all of these business units and we manage the overall experience with the customer. So we sort of put it all together for the customer, and hopefully, we do a good job between us all.
So what does it mean in practice? So that's an interesting point, actually, that I'd like to ask you. So you are at the center with all of these different business units. Do you have one main kind of credit line for your customers that you manage actually, or you centralize yourself, or as all of these different business units, an individual credit line with all of these different customers based on the general profile? How does it work in practice?
It's one credit line for the customer and one set of payment terms for that customer as well. And it should be across all of the business units. So as each one sells into that customer, if there's more than one, we would manage all of the experience that each one has with that customer and collect the money from the customer.
Okay. So we've been knowing actually each other for quite some time now. And I remember a conversation you told me a few times ago that when you want to be great at finance, you need to have a clear understanding of your customer.
Yes.
That only relying on what you see on the paper, the financials, sometimes might not be enough. You need to have a deep dive into their operations to understand them at the most. And that in that case, if you don't do that, you would eventually maybe not benefit from beneficial opportunities for your organization by being overly cautious. Can you expand on this?
Yeah, for sure. I think, as I said earlier on, the issue that you have in Middle East Africa is there's so little public information on companies. You can establish that they exist, and you could look at their website and you can try and get an idea for the scale of the operation, but you have no idea beyond that anything about the company. So to get the more information from the business, to get the audited financials, I would recommend always. And I have experience in this for many companies prior to this particular one, to be able to understand the state of the company, to be able to understand working capital, how they're paying their suppliers, how they're receiving funds from their customers, and what's the trend of the business over the next few years. Is the business viable? What's the future of the business? Will we have problems getting paid from this business? Will we potentially lose money from this business? Now, if you can understand all of that, you can form an opinion. And if you get the information that you need, you may well be able to do an awful lot more for that customer than you ordinarily would have done had you have known nothing. You may just be cautious and do little and maintain it at a certain level. Or if you understand the true scale of the business, if it's significant and it's wealthy, you should be able to do an awful lot more. And that benefits the business, it benefits the customer, and overall it's good for the experience, I think.
Would you have an example? I don't want you to name a specific customer, but would you have an example of a situation where basically on paper, the situation might look difficult actually to close as a business deal, but eventually after some discussion, investigations, maybe visiting this customer and understanding better, it has actually succeeded for both parties?
That scenario exists, and it's been done quite a few times, and obviously without any geographical pointers. But I have had many experiences where the company has been quite shy in sharing its financials. Now in Europe and in the UK, if you have a company that's very guarded about sharing its financials, you tend to think the worst, and you tend to be right. So that they're guarding something, and they're quite concerned about giving you a negative impression of their business. They won't share management accounts, for example. So the experience I've had out here is quite different. I think the businesses that are quite guarded probably have a very well-run business, and if you can understand that and you can review those financials and you can do more for them, that enables you to do an awful lot more business, and it enables the trade to be freer. So instead of doing a deal in sort of smaller chunks or smaller packages, you can do it all in one go. That may suit them, it may suit you as well. And we have done that several times, but that's more having a conversation with the company, getting their confidence, making sure that you are absolutely 100% confidential in what you receive from them, sharing it with nobody, doing the assessment, and then doing the deal.
How do you build this trust with these companies? Because you mentioned that you have team members in Romania, in the
Yes.
Philippines, here as well. But if you deal with African companies, for example, it might not be easy to build this trust. How do you do that?
It is difficult, and often these companies have accounting centres outside of Africa. So there's a few that I'm thinking of that are actually based in Dubai, based in the UAE, sometimes Abu Dhabi as well. So either a Teams call, conversation, or a visit will do it, and it's possible. Anything's possible if you're willing to put the effort in. You should be able to do it.
And are you yourself hands-on into that, or are you driving the different team members that you?
I'm hands-on within that. So because of the size of our business and because of the number of customers we have, it's fairly straightforward to take care of that yourself. So I tend to take that initiative myself, and hopefully we can do what's required. Yeah.
Does it mean that you have a lot of mice on your car and a lot of?
I don't think so. No, they don't know where I park my car.
Okay, perfect. So it's an interesting point actually, because here you are covering the Middle East and Africa region. I know that you have also some other clients in other regions, but at a sporadical level. What I would like to understand, because you have this experience coming from the UK, coming from Europe as well. How would you say or how would you detail actually the differences between specifically maybe the UAE to deal with credit risk management and the UK in this example? I mean, you mentioned actually the lack of transparency for some of this information, but apart from that, what are all the other challenges that you have encountered so far?
Yes, certainly the lack of public information is a problem, and that translates into any reference agency being able to take a report on a company. So if you take a report on a company in the UAE or anywhere else in the Middle East, if the information isn't available to that company, you have an empty shelf effectively. So you have to work this out for yourself as to what is required to be able to grant credit. That's the first instance. The second is the different kinds of companies. There are a lot more businesses here which are a sole proprietorship. So the owner is effectively like a sole trader in the UK would be, or a partnership. Their liability extends into their own personal assets. And particularly out here, if it's a high-profile individual and that owns a lot of companies, that would be regarded as a more safe bet in that particular case. So we take a judgment on that. Likewise, there are an awful lot of governmental bodies that are doing business as well. And if it's owned or backed by any of the sovereign wealth funds, then that is, again, it's a very much of a reassurance for us.
Does that mean that you have somehow adapted your risk management understanding and processes compared to the UK since you have been appointed into your role?
Yeah, I think more conversations and more discussions with the customers has to be made, because you can't just make an assessment or form an opinion based on what you have. In the UK or in Europe, the information is available. It's readily available. You can form an opinion, build a file, and have a huge case and be able to visit a customer knowing chapter and verse about their business. Here, you tend to visit and you have to be switched on and ready to listen to them, what they have to say for themselves. And as they're discussing their business, you have to be almost sort of like processing it on the fly, really, to be able to understand how they trade, how they are able to sell, to be able to make money, and then to be able to form an opinion as you're working with them. So it's a lot more. There's a lot more work that has to be done in interview effectively with the customer.
Over the last 2-3 years, we have seen a lot of global events impacting somehow actually, I mean, every kind of business. We have seen COVID, we have seen the inflation, we have seen the difficult business conditions for some industries as well. Have you faced any changes in the way that you have addressed your business and your department, witnessing these instances?
Yes. So, I mean, with COVID, I think everyone suffered a slowdown in business. So everyone's turnover decreased. So did our customers as well. And then what had happened immediately after that was it's almost a transition into working from home, then not working from home slightly, and then the Ukraine war with Russia. So what's happened there is there's been a huge surge in demand for oil. The price of oil goes up. The investment in oil increases with all of the national oil companies. So they're investing more. There's more purchasing being made, and the turnover of our customers and the turnover of the oil companies increases, and that turns into a huge demand where there previously wasn't. So low turnover to suddenly high turnover. And also in a time when interest rates are increasing, I think it's quite tough for these customers to be able to do business. The cost of borrowing is higher. They probably have had a few years of poor accounts because if the turnover has been low, they've been maintaining a business that's been doing less than they ought to be doing under better times. That has been, a few of the changes, I think. And then to be able to understand all of those events, to be able to still be able to say yes to doing business today, having seen the last 3 years worth of business, it takes some an analysis to do, but it's possible.
I mean, in these conditions as well, have you seen actually a drop or decrease of business with some of these countries or regions and an increase from other part of the world, and you had to adapt somehow your policies and your analytics in your department somehow?
No, I think everything's increased.
Okay.
Absolutely everything's increased. I would say, it's anyone who's involved in our area of business is currently enjoying a reasonable time, and we're very pleased about that.
Okay, perfect. That's very actually important to look into. But at the same time, you basically mentioned that the human touch is very important in this case. And that's sometimes, I mean, within this region, when we lack information, we lack actually transparency in some of these aspects. Does it mean that you would be traveling more to meet with these people that you would have done actually in the past as well?
There's increased travel for sure, but also we've recognised that in certain countries we prefer to have a presence, a collections presence in that country. So, for example, I mentioned Egypt is one of them, Nigeria is another one, and increasing our presence for collections in Saudi Arabia is another. So, to take Egypt, that's I think it's a good example. So, it's possible to do collections in Egypt remotely. But what we found is that because it's a predominantly Arabic-speaking country, as you visit there, everything's written in Arabic. It's their first language. With English as a second, they'll do English, but you probably would prefer to do business in Arabic. We recognised that we wanted somebody on the ground, and when we had the opportunity to hire somebody, we did just that. So our collector that we've got there is able to visit customers, to be able to build on the relationship that she has with those customers, and to be able to manage the collections, and to be able to get to the bottom of any issues that we have between ourselves and the customer, solve the problems, get the accounts payable, and then get paid as well. So that's worked terribly well, and we're quite pleased with that. Similarly with Nigeria as well, telephone collections we found has not been easy or successful. So we've hired a local collector to work that particular country, and that's just started. So, we're very pleased with that too.
So these person are actually working only on that collection and maintaining this relationship?
Yes, absolutely. So it's any selling that we do within that country would be managed by that collector.
Okay.
And so you have effectively a localized policy, whereas in other countries, English speaking is not a problem. Remote collections is not a problem. So I think you pick and choose what you do, and it's what fits and what suits us. That's what we'll do.
So you mentioned also just before that during the time of COVID, of the war and everything, inflation actually it might have impacted somehow some of the operations and the business of some of these clients. How do you manage actually the relationship between your department and your sales department? When the sales department wants to push for a sale, and at the same time you say, oh, we need to be cautious, and you need actually to sometimes remove some of these deals from the table actually. So how do you manage this relationship with the rest of the team?
Yeah, I think it's a collaborative approach, and I think as long as we're all seeing the same information and we can make the same decision, we can do it. And if the business unit wants to make a decision on its own and do some business that we're probably advising against, they may well do it, but it would be on their own risk. And I think that's the important thing is I always say our business is to avoid expensive, unexpected surprises. And I think if we're aware of the risks that we're facing and we're all completely happy and we still decide to do it, well, that's what we do. And that works well as well. It very rarely happens though. You know,
Okay.
we do.
I guess the company's policies are actually quite clear,
I
actually, what to
think so.
expect anyway, and that you have the last word.
Exactly,
on these
and I
aspects.
think it doesn't really occur. So, you know, I think everyone's happy. I think everyone gets what they want.
Does it mean that you have regular educational actually or training aspects with this team actually to explain what you do, how you do it, and what's the purpose and benefits of it? Or
I would say in terms of risk, I think it's as we go along. So any issues that we have in terms of risk, we'll talk about them. The training we tend to do with the business units tends to be around letters of credit and how to successfully execute a sale with a letter of credit and get it right and get paid, because that's a process that's fraught with danger. And because we're an international company and because we're shipping from a number of locations, and the customers would require certain documentation to be able to clear the goods, to be able to clear the payments, we have to make sure that we do everything correctly. So everyone being on the same page, being educated, is something that we do. And the lady that does that for us does a very good job in terms of both managing the process, but also educating the business units as well.
So you have highlighted several times that the human touch, a human
Yes.
actually factor is very important, critical, especially in this region. At the same time, we are looking at a lot of innovation coming in. We have artificial intelligence, automation, blockchain, anything else. How do you see the future of your industry in the medium term, maybe?
I think for the collections efforts, I think the more improving the accounts receivable process, applying cash better, faster, using intelligent methods to do it. I should have called it AI, because I don't really think it is. I think it's more machine learning, but certainly being able to receive cash and being able to apply cash against invoices without human intervention, I think is an important part. If the machine can learn that this customer pays this account or these 5 accounts, that's something that ought to be pursued. And I'm very keen to do that. I've done it in the past in other companies. It's something that we're looking at within our own organization as well. That's one side of it. The second side for me, I think, would be in terms of the prioritization of who we contact. So if you have 1,000 customers, for example, who do you contact first? And it's being able to identify the customers that are perhaps breaking with their payment patterns, slowing down, perhaps pose an increased risk. Those customers are the ones that perhaps become higher in our order of contacts, and they're the ones that we ought to be focusing our attention on, rather than just doing it across all the customers. We do it on certain customers, and maybe some better customers we leave alone. So if they always pay on time, maybe they're a few days late, we don't trouble them. And that, I think, is a very smart way of doing business. I think I'd prefer to see that sort of approach. And as time goes on, I'm sure we'll come up with more.
Is that something that is actually led and implemented by the headquarter, or is it something very specific that you can apply and maybe regionalize somehow as well?
It's headquarter led. So, our collections are centralized from North America, and we all use the same systems and we use the same approaches. But it is something that, as things come along, we challenge what we currently do. We introduce new ideas, and that's the challenge. So how can we implement it?
So do you have some freedom somehow to customize some of these processes or even tools that you are using or software that you are using for that? Because like you mentioned, this region is somehow unique, right? Actually,
Yes,
compared to the rest of the world, especially through your headquarters. So
it is.
Is it something that you would like to be able to implement?
Anything that can improve the collections, we'd consider. So the way we organise ourselves is down to us. But in terms of technologies, buying technologies, that's something that would need to be discussed as a corporation. And because we're a large corporation rather than a small business in the Middle East, we have to look at this from a sort of almost a central location.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, you discuss the debt collection specifically in these cases. What about the credit risk assessment of your existing or new customers? How do you see the technology or the innovation actually changing these aspects? Or what, in your opinion, would be a real game changer for this specific task actually to evolve in the future?
Game changer for me, I think, going back to your original question, which is in terms of credit and risk and credit assessment, yes, we do have some latitude in our world area to be able to change what we do. So other world areas would use other providers. We've chosen Cedar Rose. So we would use them because we consider them to provide the best information that we need for our credit assessments. Anything else that we see in terms of assessing customers would consider that too, because it is, like you say, it's unique for this world area. Now, what would be a game changer for me is if everyone could share their information. I think that would be quite nice if we could do that. I know that the UAE authorities, they share information for all of their services. They're very public about what they do. That ought to be, cascaded out to the private sector. I would want the private sector to become more open about what they do, how they do it, and that way there's some transparency. I think it will improve the perception of companies that we deal with, anyone deals with in the Middle East, in the GCC countries. Also, it would show how they're paying their suppliers. And I think that, again, is a public statement of we pay our suppliers on time, we don't pay our suppliers on time. And you can make a decision based on that information as a supplier to that company.
Yeah, I think you're right there. There is a lot of education and training actually to be done, not only for the UAE, but for the whole region. But it's also to educate them that the more they share will be to their benefit at the end of the day, because the more information that we have on these companies, the better the credit risk or the credit score actually will be. I mean, totally. If they don't actually deal with dodgy business eventually, obviously, but that's actually a very important factor. When I speak about technology and automation, I always think of what will be the impact on the human resources eventually, because it's always related. We've seen actually a lot of people being fired from actually all of these big companies, tech companies with the, maybe they use AI or they don't use it AI, but whatever it is. You have actually a team spread across multiple geographies, multiple time zones. First of all, I'd like to understand, how do you cope with this big team with different cultures, different timings at the same time? How is it actually to manage
Sure, it's a good point. So for the Cluj operation in Romania, because they're in roughly the same time zone as Africa, that works quite well for them. They can work a regular day. Our operation in the Philippines works the Middle East hours. So they pretty much start working at 1, 2 in the afternoon and walk all the way through till 10 p.m. They're all a very, very hardworking, good team. They know our customers very well. We have now a low turnover of staff, which we're very pleased about. And the way, my philosophy within any of this, any leadership of the team is that, the management, the leadership is there to serve the collectors, to make sure they have the right tools to do the job, to make sure that they've got the right workload, and also to set the right targets as well, so that they're achievable, that they're stretch targets, but they're not impossible to achieve. And I think that gives a happy employee, and that gives a terrific performance from that group as well. And likewise, the collectors in the countries, similar approach, but we have them, if we can, visiting the customers as well.
Okay, perfect. And interesting question. You are a director for the risk management actually at Emerson. If young people, young professionals currently look at this podcast today, what would be your recommendations if they want to follow the same path or the same career in the future? What would be the background, the skills, the different aspect that they would need actually to develop to be in your position? Maybe not today, but in the next 5-10 years, for example, with these changes that we are actually witnessing.
Yeah, totally. I think my advice has always been to anyone who's considering this career or this profession of risk management is to take a formal qualification. So I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. I'm a fellow of that as well since 2013. And I think that sort of education gives you the background, the foundation to be able to build and take experience on top of that. The other thing I'd say to anyone who's considering this sort of profession is work in several companies, work in a small or medium-sized company, work in a different number of environments, business to consumer, business to business. Working in a large company puts you in a niche. You're probably a very small part of a process. Working in a smaller company, you manage a massive process. You're responsible for an awful lot. It's a lot of experience. And I've got to say, I have a huge background in different businesses, different backgrounds, high turnover, low profit, high risk companies. Also French conglomerate, very high turnover, high profit, very low risk. And you basically, within the business that you operate, you will understand more about risk management if you just proceed through that. And likewise, the other thing I would say is that be curious about companies' accounts, read companies' accounts, learn about companies that have failed, and then try and look at the car crash and work it backwards yourself. If you're interested in reading accounts, try and work out what happened to that company. And I do that often. I think it's quite engaging to be able to do this. And it teaches you a few things about risk as well.
And I guess also specifically for this region, soft skills will be very much important. Actually, empathy, communication, learn different languages as well will be very important actually within this region, correct?
Totally. I know English, I know Australian, I know American, but you're absolutely right. Being able to speak to people, being able to listen to what they have to say, to be able to understand their business, and to be able to be willing to help and be able to willing to do what you possibly can to make the sale happen. And I think that's the right way to be.
No, that's perfect. Thanks a lot, Andrew. Actually, it was very insightful, at least to me. I hope it's going to be for the audience. I have a series of quick fire questions I would like actually to ask you. Just one thought. United Arab Emirates or United Kingdom?
United Arab Emirates.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Beach or deserts?
Beach.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Then coffee or tea in the morning?
Coffee.
Cooking at home or dining out?
Dining out.
Okay, a few ones on the professional aspects. Numbers of words or words, sorry.
Sorry, repeat that?
Numbers or words, like you want to speak in, is it sentences in the words or sentences?
Words, I would say.
Okay. Proactive or reactive credit management?
Proactive.
Hands-on or delegative management?
A bit of both. Yeah, probably a bit of both. I think to delegate is a good thing, but I enjoy getting involved as well.
Data-driven or human intelligence?
Human intelligence.
Innovation or HR talent?
Innovation.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Andrew. It was very insightful. Thanks a lot. For the audience, honestly, I hope that you enjoy also actually these best practices and experience shared by one of the best in the field. If you have any questions, any comment, please share these actually for this podcast. We'd be very happy to address the same. And until next time, please keep exploring the world of credit risk management. And don't hesitate to contact Andrew as well. He will be very happy to address some of your expectations. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.